Hi there, and welcome back to our reflections from St Andrews in the middle of the week on Wednesday, the 21st of October. It's a while since I've recorded a reflection. That's because I've been out of circulation for a bit, having been self-isolating due to myself and other family members having been tested positive for coronavirus. But don't worry, we're still here. I've been struggling a bit with ill health, but apart from that, we're trying to bounce back, but still keeping safe and self-isolating. But it's led me today to spend a lot of time surfing the government website and looking at what the rules and regulations are to do with self-isolating. And if you've delved into the depths of it, it's actually very confusing when you have more than one of you in a household. But I'll come back to that in a bit, because the big question is, I suppose, is it lawful? Or what is lawful when it comes to being able to go outside or do things? And that prompted me to look back at last week's Gospel Bible reading for last Sunday. And I want to share that with you first before I go any further with things. And it comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22, and it's a short passage from verses 15 to verse 22. It's a question about paying taxes, but the big question that overarches all of that is, what is lawful in terms of paying taxes? I say that's somebody who still hasn't submitted my tax return yet. But that's another story for another occasion. Nothing dodgy going on, I just can't access the websites. Anyway, let me begin with Matthew 22, beginning at verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is on it, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. I love that short passage. People trying to trap Jesus, but tripped over their own trap and fell headlong into it. Is it lawful, they are asking? Is it lawful for us at the moment to meet with others in Leeds? Mostly not, in terms of being in households or indoor spaces. Is it lawful to go out? I've been talking to people who were travelling towards Lancaster, in an area that is in the third tier. The whole three-tier thing is confusing as to what is lawful. Is it lawful to travel if you have coronavirus? Of course it isn't, unless you are taking somebody else for a test, as I had to do the other day. But not travel. So, because we're in self-isolation due to 3 of us in our house having tested positive, we've had to cancel our holiday for half term, which is a huge bummer. I have to admit, I'm not desperate to go out at this time of year, but it does disturb me when we saw the images on the television just in Liverpool. Nothing against Liverpool, but about the last night before they brought in the new rules about pubs and stuff, and went into tier 3, and then locked everything down. And it's always a shame, isn't it, when we see a few people spoiling it for everybody else. So if these things are not lawful, and it's not lawful to meet in more groups of more than 6 or from joint households or all this kind of stuff, then why do it? Why do people do it? I read a statistic the other day that said only 18% of people who have tested positive for coronavirus are actually self-isolating properly within the guidelines. Now, some of that could be because the guidelines are slightly confusing, or as I've discovered today, very confusing. But those guidelines are there for a reason, and they are there to keep everybody safe. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking about how we've had so many contacts from NHS Test and Trace. And that's today that it's been non-stop contacts from Test and Trace. You may have seen the BBC News article yesterday about where Martin Usborne was saying about how many times his family, his wife, himself, and on behalf of his 2 toddlers, have been contacted. 60 plus phone calls in a very short space of time to do with Test and Trace. And I have to say it's been the same for us too, with 3 members having tested positive. Not only do we get contacted because we are positive, we get contacted because we have been in contact with somebody who has tested positive. And this seems to confuse the whole Test and Trace system, especially when we've tested positive at different times. The staff are all very nice, don't get me wrong, they've been absolutely lovely. But we've had voicemails, we've had emails, we've had texts, we've had phone calls. Rachel deleted off her phone 11 voicemails the other day that were all Test and Trace from a short space of time. It seems to be that the system takes each contact separately and doesn't seem to be able to collate information. And yet the system, however fallible, is there to protect everybody. Coming back to the question, what is lawful? Well, we should do whatever we can to stay within the law. If I'm not allowed out, then I don't go out. That's as simple as that. What should we do? Well, I think it's back to basics. Remember, at the very beginning of everything, and I've said this several times recently, keep safe, protect the NHS, protect others. That's the message we were given to start with, and that still applies. Most of the contacts, the majority apart from one today, which was the confusing one, all said from the NHS that we will be breaking the law if I did not isolate until at least the 30th of October. Going back to that passage from Matthew chapter 22, is it lawful? Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor? I want to read you a small excerpt from Roots, a commentary on that passage, which says, the gospel passage centres on the idea of images. Roman coinage bore the image of the emperor. It was issued in his name, and therefore, in a sense, it was his. In Matthew 22, we read how the Pharisees attempted to trap Jesus. The trap is avoided by Jesus deflecting the attention to the emperor's image. Then he goes further by advocating that God should be given the things that are God's. A human person is made in God's image, the image of God. It's important that the created, us, emulates the Creator, God, and lives up to the image with which they have been stamped. So as if we were a coin, we should live up to the image that we have been stamped with, the image of God. Which law should we follow? That was confusing for those Pharisees and the Herodians because they didn't know whether they were, or they didn't know, but they were trying to trick Jesus as to whether they should follow Roman law or Jewish law. It is confusing, and it was confusing for them. It's confusing for us now with all the guidelines and rules because they are open to interpretation. But Jesus tells his listeners to work out the lesser obligations in the light of their primary obligations to God. What are ours? Do what is right, based on loving God and loving neighbour, which brings us back again to keep safe, protect others, protect the NHS, look after our communities, those we love and those we care for and those around us, those who take care of us. look after everyone in the light of our primary obligations to God as Christians. Do what is right in loving God and loving neighbour. Keep that first, and the rest will fall into place. I want to share with you a prayer from Ruth's. Let us pray. We confess to you, great God, that we are not always a good example of what it is to be a Christian. We do not feel worthy that others should follow us. And yet, Lord, you encourage us to share your love and reveal your truth and lead others to you. We confess that we fail, and we are sorry. We confess our inadequacies and our carelessness in standing up for what is right against what is wrong. Forgive us, Lord, and guide us in the ways of truth and justice. We want to be a good example, a shining example of what it means to be a Christian, a follower of Jesus. So in this time of confusing rules as to how we should live, how we should protect others, into a world of confusion and disbelief, into a world of welcome and rejection, we take the grace of God that has been among us and the peace of God that has been on our hearts. Amen. Thank you for listening. Good night. God bless.